Winter sealed the village, but the forge had never truly gone cold.
No one entered that workshop anymore, yet iron still answered from within.
The snow melted first at the door, as if something beneath remembered fire.
Something heavy had been dragged through the dark, and nothing dragged it back.
I arrived too late for truth, but just in time for its remains.
Half buried in snow, the iron tongs were warm enough to burn. Cold air should have killed the heat, but this heat did not belong here.
When I asked about the forge, every face in the room turned away.
An old woman whispered, "Never let the furnace hear your true name." In the corner sat a man whose hands looked shaped by surviving fire. He said the forge was not abandoned, only left without a master. The scars on his palm were not wounds. They were old promises. That night had not yet come, but the hammer had already struck. I heard the second strike before the first had finished. By midday, the village had gone quiet, but the forge had begun to breathe. The walls did not move, but the space between them was no longer the same. The iron should have cooled, but it held the heat like memory.
He did not call it a ritual, he called it a process.
Once you step closer, he said, the forge stops asking and starts taking.
He did not ask what I carried. He already knew it had weight. The forge does not take what you show. It takes what you hide.
It was not the object that mattered. It was what it refused to let go.
The heat did not burn the skin. It burned the memory behind it.
Once the memory rises, the forge decides what remains and what is taken.
The first strike is never the loudest. It is the one you cannot refuse.
He did not force the blow. He only made sure I could not step away. The heat did not come from the fire. It came... The forge does not break you. It waits until yourself.
When the hammer finally falls, it does not decide. It confirms. I was no longer resisting, only holding what was left. The room did not change shape, but it stopped obeying its own limits. The fire was no longer outside me. It had already moved in.
The forge was not changing me. It was removing what did not hold. The heat did not fade. It withdrew, as if its work was already done.
You're changing, only settling into form. I tried to remember what I had lost. Reach.
The forge did not release me. It simply stopped holding me.
I stepped back into the cold, and for the first time, it felt honest.
The village had not changed, but the way I saw it had already shifted.
They looked at me as if something had returned, but not the same thing that left.
The cold touched my skin, but it no longer reached anything beneath it.
I tried to recall the moment I had lost. The forge had taken what it needed and left me exactly as required.
I thought the process had ended, but something still held its shape.
The silence returned, but it no longer felt empty.
I could not feel the cold, but I could feel where it should have been.
The forest had not moved, but the distance to it had changed.
The forge had gone silent, but something was still listening.
I had stepped away from the forge, but the distance did not feel complete. He watched me carefully, not as someone who survived, but as something that returned. The silence between us carried more weight than anything that had been said. I was no longer waiting for something to happen. Something was waiting through me.
The forge had finished its work, but something in me had just begun.
The path ahead was clear, but it no longer felt like a choice.
The forest accepted me, but not in the way it had before. I could no longer tell where the forge ended and where I began. The distance between things had stopped meaning anything at all.
The forge was no longer behind me. It had simply changed position.
The clearing was empty, but it felt prepared long before I arrived. I was not being watched, but nothing here felt unaware of me. I did not feel chosen, only placed where something required me. The process had not ended. It had only changed its direction. What had been taken was gone, but what remained was no longer mine. There was nothing left to follow, only something to remain for. The air did not move, and neither did anything within it. The shape of this place had settled, and it had settled around me. I was not standing in the space, I was holding it in place. The silence was not empty. It was waiting for something to begin again. Far from the clearing, the world continued, unaware of what had taken shape.
There is always a place where the path feels slightly different, before you know why.
The cold shifts first, before anything else begins to follow.
The first step always feels like your own, until it no longer is.
The forge does not call twice. It simply waits for the next to arrive.